Ingrid is a New York Times bestselling author, writing coach, inclusion activist, and inspirational speaker who is passionate about leveraging personal storytelling to foster healing, awareness, empathy, and change. And Ingrid, that is such a beautiful mission, and it really spoke to my heart. And I'm really looking forward to what you're going to share with our community today. We always love when we have speakers who are, telling their personal story in order to help and inspire others. So thank you for being vulnerable with us in this space. You've got a great community of women on the line so far. 47 people have joined. Good morning, everyone. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay.
Thanks, Monica. And thank you all. I'm so excited to be here today because this is a topic that I'm very passionate about. And I figure that if you've tuned in, it means you could use a dose of the lessons I've learned, because I can tell you that I know firsthand just how soul destroying the toxic stories we all feed on from time to time can be. A couple of years ago, I was literally curled in a ball on my living room floor, so paralyzed with grief and fear that I couldn't move after a 15-year fight to save my eyesight from a rare degenerative eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. I had lost, and in part, after fighting so hard, what caused me to lose it was chemotherapy for an aggressive form of breast cancer. And I can tell you, just the thought of not being able to see my daughter's faces or the world around me was so crushing, it was hard to breathe. But it was the stories that I was telling myself about what my vision loss meant in terms of my societal value or my self-worth that almost did me in. I mean, I was lobbying every cruel, demeaning story that I could come up with, and my head was full of them. I told myself that I was unhireable. I mean, who would want to hire a blind writer or author? Not to mention that how was I possibly going to write when I couldn't see the words on my computer screen or even figure out how to turn on my computer? I told myself that I was a huge burden to my family and my friends. And that probably more than anything, that idea of being a burden when I'd been so fiercely independent. I mean, that was kind of my mantra. I had traveled the world on my own. I had gone into the bush in southern Sudan on my own. And now I couldn't even figure out how to walk around the block on my own, down the block, or turn on my microwave or my washing machine. And I thought, oh my God, like, how can I live being a burden to my family and friends? So that then translated to, wow, I am worthless. I am less than. I am weak. Oh my God, I failed. I mean, I fought so hard to save my eyesight that I had even gone to China twice to get stem cell implants. I had done a GoFundMe to go over there, and I thought, I've let all these people who supported me down. On top of that, I was writing a blog called Determined to See, where I was telling everybody fighting this eye disease to say no to no hope. And I was doing so many things on the alternative therapy front. I mean, from diet to eye exercises and gut massages and staring into color therapy lamps and soaking my feet in mugwort and traveling across country to New Jersey for specialized eye acupuncture. I was doing everything, and I thought, wow, I have let that community down. I've failed. And like the whole thing about all of this is that I could find evidence to support the stories I was telling myself. I mean, this whole thing about now being less than and worthless. I mean, I could look around and just know that I could hear people whispering about me or looking down at me. I had early on, right after I lost it, called this organization to get assistive technology training so I could get back to work. And the guy I was talking with told me to instead join this vision loss support group at a senior center in my neighborhood because he told me that I could now expect stigma and social isolation. And I would go through the airport lines and be put in a different line now because I couldn't see my way through kind of the screening. So it's like, you know, I was having all this evidence to support that I was now worthless, that I was now weak, that I had lost my identity. And that's where I was. And I honestly, I mean, I've always been a positive person, but I was in such a dark place. I felt like I was being buried alive, that I couldn't claw my way out of this. And I have a very supportive family, and they kept, trying to pull me up in every way. My daughters kept reminding me of the saying I've had for so long, that I am the power and the light. And they kept circling me with love, but I just could not pull myself out of it. And I might have completely self-destructed, except for that I couldn't stand being so miserable and so dark. And so one day, a couple of years ago, I sent this emergency SOS text to this woman, Banaz. She's a psychologist turned intuitive healer who I had talked with in the past, and she'd helped me. And I thought, well, I don't know how she can possibly help me out of this one, but I'll try anything. So it really was this emergency SOS. She's down in Austin, Texas, this wonderful woman. And I'd known that she'd experienced her own loss. So I had her on the phone and I just cried. I was such a mess. I couldn't even talk. I just sobbed for about 5 minutes straight. And finally she said, my dear, like, how can I help you? And I just kept sobbing. And finally I found my words and I said, Banaz, like, I need some tools. I need some tools to get out of this. How do you get yourself out of that dark abyss when it just seems so hard? And she just said, well, what I do when I'm really struggling is that I refocus my attention from that loss to the things that bring me passion and joy. And she said, for example, I really like the water. So when I'm having a tough time, I will go down to the water. And I can tell you, this just ignited this huge fire and rage in me, because I like the water too. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that's about a half a mile from a beach, and I used to do a beach walk every day, but now I couldn't walk there. I couldn't get there. And even if I could get someone to drive me, it's not like I could see the water out there, or the sailboats, or the mountains in the distance, or, the beautiful sky, the sandy beaches. So I was just fuming. And then I started thinking about it. It's like everything that brings me passion and joy is gone. I mean, I love walking into a coffee shop to get a cup of coffee, and I can't go in and order a cup of coffee. I can't go on a walk on my own. I can't see the beautiful things that I used to see, flowers or sunsets. I can't travel anymore, because what's the point of traveling if I can't see the beautiful things and the new places? I can't see my daughter's faces or my husband's faces. I can't see my face. I can't see my computer screen. Everything that brought me passion and joy is gone. So I just sat there fuming, steaming, and all of this, continuing to sob while I waited for Banaz to respond. And she just wasn't. She was just waiting for me to say something. So finally I said, yeah, Banaz, but my life has been stripped away from me. Everything that I had is gone. I mean, I can't work. My identity's gone. I mean, I'm a burden. Everything's gone. And now when she spoke, it was a little bit more forceful. And she said, my dear, why are you telling yourself these stories? Why are you telling yourself that now I'm weak instead of strong? Why are you telling yourself that you've lost your identity, that you can't impact people's lives, that you are a burden to your family and friends? She said, my dear, these are just stories, and you need to change the stories you're telling yourself. And I can tell you, I don't know why those words resonated when nothing else did, but they just had a huge impact. The thing is that the entire work that I do is all about, again, tapping the powers of our stories to foster healing and empathy and awareness and love, right? And I thought, why have I been telling myself all these stories? Why have I been so mean and cruel to myself? And is it really as simple as just changing the stories that I've been telling myself? So I managed to pull myself off the floor and settled into my couch. And literally, as I was processing the power of these words, our window was open. It was early May Day a couple years ago, and our neighbor often plays jazz, and I could hear the sounds of Dave Brubeck streaming through our window. And I love Dave Brubeck. I first discovered him when I was in Pittsburgh living there with my husband, and suddenly it hit me. It's like, wow, I love music. Music brings me joy. I love every kind of music. I love jazz. I love everything from the Beatles to Eminem to ABBA. I love dancing, having dance parties with my daughters in the living room. It's like, wow, that brings me joy. I can still do that. And then I started thinking, because it was a rare sunny day in Seattle in May, and I thought, God, I love the sun. I love being on our boat on Lake Union on a warm day and doing happy hour, listening to music. That brings me joy. I thought, wow, I love the smell of candles. I love soaking in our hot tub. Those bring me joy. And even though, I can no longer read books, which I love. I mean, thank God for audiobooks. I mean, I can listen to audiobooks. And then I thought, maybe taking walks is one of my favorite things ever, but I can still do that. Even, I mean, I can do it to a lesser extent with this cane that I call Purple Power. But, when I'm going on walks with my husband, holding his hand, or one of my daughter's hands, like, I forget that I even have this eye thing. So I can still take long walks. And so then it suddenly hit me. It's like, wow, I actually do have a lot of things that bring me passion and joy. It was just looking at it in a different light. So then I thought, well, I've got to really start examining these stories that I've been telling myself and try to test their validity and see if, I used to work as a journalist. So I thought, I'm putting on my journalist hat and I'm going to take a step back and at the very least, look at it from a place of neutrality to test the validity of the stories that I'm telling myself. But I thought I'm also going to treat myself with the same compassion and love that I would give to my friends, or at least the same respect that I'd give to any stranger off the street when I'm looking at these stories to see if there could possibly be evidence that could support a different outcome. So I made a list and I started with the two biggies. First one, I can no longer work. Now, at the time, I had been mostly doing ghostwriting books for clients. In fact, I had just been wrapping up a book project when my eyesight went out on me. And I thought, well, okay, is it true I can't work? Well, at the moment, it's true that I couldn't write. I mean, I really didn't know how to operate my computer, and I certainly didn't know how to type on it at the point. But I also knew that there was plenty of assistive technology training out there. And that if I could just let go from that tight grip that I had on the way I was doing things, if I could just let go and expand my mind and be adaptable, that I could learn this assistive technology training and I could get back to writing. So that story was false, right? Then I thought, am I a burden? Am I a burden to my family and friends? And again, I just had to take a step back from this and look at this like I would treat family members or friends or loved ones how I would view it. And I thought, would I view them as a burden just because they were stuck with vision loss or other hard things? And I thought, of course I wouldn't. And then I thought, isn't that what family and community is about, to help each other out? And I thought, asking for help isn't a sign of weakness. It takes a lot of strength to ask for help. So okay, both of those things are false. The idea that I'm a burden and the idea that I'm a weak. So then I went to, am I a failure? Did I fail? And this one, I knew deep down that it was ridiculous. I mean, I grew up road tripping around the country with my dad, and he has this saying, it's like, as long as you keep on going, you never know what you can accomplish. As soon as you quit, you have your answer. And the thing is, I realized the only way we fail is if we don't try. The only way we fail is if we quit. And I have none of those things in my DNA. I mean, even though at the particular moment, I can't see any of you, I very much know that I am meant to see in literal terms, and I'll keep on going until I have it back. And in fact, and she may be on here, my beautiful friend Cindy in the Dallas area sent me this article about a week and a half ago, and it turns out that in Texas, they've had this huge breakthrough now and have been able to restore partial but very functional vision in people with my eye disease. In fact, I have an interview with them scheduled for Thursday. So, okay, no, I did not fail. And all those people that I was encouraging through my blog to say no to no hope, I didn't fail them by losing my eyesight. I mean, that wasn't failing them. I still encouraging them to say no to no hope. So that was a big fat false. And then the final story that I was telling myself was, oh, does this hurt? Is this hard? And that one, I was like, well, yeah, if I focus on all the loss around it, then it does hurt. And it is hard. But, you know, as I was thinking about it, I realized I certainly don't have a monopoly on adversity. I mean, I had the incredible opportunity to go into South Africa to write about the plight of AIDS orphans for this nonprofit organization about 15 years ago. And a lot of the relief workers, I mean, that community, 40% of the people in that community had full-blown AIDS, and it was only because the others were too scared to get tested. And I mean, it was an awful situation. And several of the relief workers that I was following around to administer to those who were dying in these sweltering hot huts, laying on this mat as they're like soaked in diarrhea and vomiting, and just trying to give them herbs to relieve their pain and tell them that they would take care of their children and watch after their children after they're gone. I learned at the very end of this that these women also had AIDS, but they were choosing to focus on helping others instead of marinating in, like, you know, their own self-pity like that I was doing. And I started thinking about them and that strength, and realized that when I'm focused on other things, I kind of forget about it. So I thought, wow. And as I went through this, I realized that the biggest story that I was telling myself, and I think a lot of us do this, I realized that I was telling myself that I could control what happened in my life. And that had served me, that story had served me well for a while. It's what enabled me to pursue my book writing dream and put my and create this amazing family and live in this city neighborhood that I love, all these things. But I was so immersed in that story, believing that story, that when it didn't go my way and I got hit with this eye disease and then thought I could control it. And then I was for a while, but then when the cancer came along and the chemo knocked it out, that just completely, because I was clinging so hard to that story, like I just could not pick myself up from that for a while. And so as I was looking at that bigger story, I realized, wow, okay, yeah, none of us can control as much as we think we can. We cannot control what happens in life. I think COVID is a big example of that. But what I realized is that doesn't mean we're powerless, because we can control what we do with what life throws at us. We can decide what we're going to do with those hurdles. And that's the power of it. That's what it's all about. So then what I did after I'd gone through this exercise, which I'm going to have all of you do in a few minutes, I thought, well, okay, So what am I going to do about this? I've realized that I've debunked all these stories. So now what? And I thought, okay, the biggest thing that I wanted to kind of negate was this idea that somehow I was less than, or my societal value was gone, or all of this. So I thought, well, how can I flip that on its head? How can I take this eyesight thing, and instead of it feeling like it's somehow a hindrance, how can I turn it into something powerful? And I meditate to this guy, Joe Dispenza. I love him. He's my favorite inspirational author. And it's you are the placebo making your mind matter. And he always says, bless our challenges that they initiate us into greatness. And I thought, okay, what can I do to strip that story, those stories of that worthlessness that's on its head? And so I thought, well, I'm going to start doing talk harnessing adversity. So and I thought, if I do that, then it's almost like this self-fulfilling thing, because I've got to focus on that. So the first thing I did, I reached out to this man that I often do these healing through personal storytelling workshops for his organization. And I reached out, and I knew he was doing these summer educational series for educators. And I said, I want to do a talk on harnessing adversity, and you don't have to pay me. I just need to do this talk. And he's like, great. So I flew out a couple of years ago it was the first kind of step in this. And I did this talk on harnessing adversity. And it was just forcing me to focus in that. And it was great, because suddenly, instead of this adversity being kind of my downfall, it was this thing of like, how do you channel it? How do you do something more powerful? And then I took it from there. And it's like, well, okay, I hate that. Well, I hate the B word, and I hate that word disability. And I hate it that people have been attaching this label to me or to anyone, because here's the thing. I mean, I'm going through breast cancer and all that chemotherapy. If you want to use that word disability, I was disabled in every sense of the word. I was in bed so sick from that chemo, I couldn't move, but people weren't telling me to go join my leper colony because of that. People were calling me, and they were so supportive, and they were bringing me casseroles and asking how I was doing. And I thought, why is it different? Why is it? I mean, because we all face hard challenges in our life. I have not met one person through the incredible storytelling workshops that I've done. I've not met one person that doesn't have something hard that they've struggled with. And I thought, why is it that some of the challenges are shoved under these labels, and then slapped on labels, and then we like marginalize? And so then I thought, okay, the next way that I can flip these stories on its head is to start doing talks around that, on erasing the disabilities label, by using my story and the challenges and bumps that I've run into, and then have people really focus on their own stories and the biggest challenges they've faced, emotional or physical, so that they can really drill down and realize that at the core, we are all the same. At the core, we all have challenges that we face. At the core, we just all want to be accepted and all want to be loved. And just erasing that. So I started doing those talks and feeling a lot of power. And then I started thinking, well, if I went back to what Banaz was saying, how to focus or refocus my attention from that loss side to the strength side. So the reality was, even though I started doing assistive technology training and stuff, writing books was a lot harder, particularly for hire, because I mean, it just, when you're listening to every word that you're typing and trying to go in, the editing process is challenging. So I thought, well, okay, that just, all it does right now, if I'm trying to write books, is magnify the loss. But I thought, but where are my strengths? I had already been teaching quite a lot through this literary organization in Seattle called Hugo House, and doing workshops, storytelling workshops, and harnessing the healing power of our stories through these different organizations. And I thought, well, why don't I expand that? I love it. I love the power of stories to foster healing and awareness. And I love helping people to tell their stories. So I thought, well, why don't I just expand that? So I started teaching more workshops through these organizations and expanding to other organizations. But then also I thought, well, why don't I just do my own too and see what happens? And wow, I started making my own offerings and people were coming to them. So I thought that's great. And then it turns out, just as I'm playing around with this, COVID hits, because I started playing around with it. It's like, okay, well, what's the next thing? What if I started doing these kind of coaching people on their full-length memoirs? I had already started coaching a couple of people on their books, just sort of on the side, but I thought, well, why couldn't I shift my focus to that? I don't need to read for that. I have readers that can read back their chapters, and I can coach them on the phone, talk through it. And so I started doing this, but logistically, it was kind of a challenge trying to get people to come to a place, 6 or 7 people in Seattle, in my neighborhood. And then COVID hits. And suddenly, because I had been already on this mission for the last year to adapt and evolve and let go of the way that I was doing things, it was like introduce Zoom, and it was like, boom. I mean, suddenly I didn't have to worry about logistics, and it opened up this whole new model for me in terms of being able to do coaching for people, group coaching, individual coaching, these workshops. And the amazing thing about it now, 2 years ago from that date when I told myself the story that I couldn't work anymore. How was I possibly going to work? That my life was over in that area, that I wasn't going to be able to contribute to my family, all of these things. I am way busier now than I was before I started telling myself those stories and before my eyesight went away. It's just been remarkable in terms of reclaiming some of my independence. It was the same thing. I had to let go of the old thinking and the way I was doing things and look at the amazing tools out there to help me. And I mean, I can tell you that I was not a fan of the cane thing at all. I mean, I did not want to do that. But when I finally thought, well, is that stick going to have power over me, or am I going to use it to empower myself until I no longer need it? And I got a purple one because I did not want to be identified with. I didn't want this universal stamp and be, but it's been great. So between that purple cane that I call Purple Power, and between this amazing technology on the smartphone that enables me, it's called Blind Square, and it's this incredible app that I can walk down the block and it will announce kind of the street corners and where I'm at, and even when I'm getting close to buildings, it has built-in GPS. So it's really amazing. So using that has got me back to where, I can go for walks and walk down to the office that I squat in with my husband about a mile from our house. And little things as simple as raised dots that I put on my microwave or on my washing machine have enabled me to get back to doing functional things. And then, like I said, I just listen to a lot of audiobooks, and it turns out that now a lot of programming on Netflix in particular, but a lot of new programming now has audio descriptions. So between the dialogue of the characters, this audio description will come in and describe it so I can enjoy film and movies and different things. So it's just been incredible. Like, what happened now, I realize, and like I said, the idea that I had to really start applying this to myself is kind of crazy, because I've always been about the power of our stories, helping people to tap the power of their story, to share their stories, so that it's almost like a domino effect, and we realize that we aren't alone and that we're in common. But it took me some time to apply that to myself and tap that power of my story for myself. But now, instead of feeling like, oh my God, like if I talk about my eyesight stuff, or the minute people recognize it, they're going to somehow pity me or think less of. Now, when I go into workshops, I just start out by talking about this eye challenge, and it's suddenly I've claimed back my power around it. It's like, I've got an eyesight challenge. What's your challenge? We've all got challenges. So
Ingrid,
Yeah,
I don't want to interrupt your stream of thought, but I think that's so beautiful. And I want to pause on that for a minute and on a couple of things you said, because I think they are so important, and also read you some of the comments that are coming in through the chat. Is that okay if I pause you
yeah,
for a moment
yeah.
here? So first of all, I love how you have been so vulnerable and really walked us through that process of ebb and flow, right? In these ups and downs of your healing journey. And one of the things that you said about the purple power and the cane really struck me, because it was a really great example of how you reframed that conversation in your head about, the cane being your crutch versus the cane being your power. And
Right.
I wanted to call that out because I think that's so beautiful, and it's such a simple example, but it really shifted something for you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it sounds like part of this practice and work you're doing is every time you encounter one of those stories in your head, which you recognize now as being negative, you say, how can I turn that on its head? That's
Absolutely. And I'm going to walk you all through, because this is the whole thing. It's like one thing to make the decision and go through this exercise. And it's another thing altogether, I think, to stay in that frame, because it's a daily practice for me. So I want to spend the last 10 minutes just walking you all through that. But I mean, this is a good time, I think, a good break. I would love all of you. I hope kind of my story has kind of jarred something. And I would love it if all of you would take 2 or 3 or 5 minutes, whatever it is, to think about, make a list of the negative stories, the toxic stories that you might have been telling yourself, that have been holding you hostage, that have been holding you back. And then I want you to go through what I did, take a step back and think about it in terms of, is there a way to flip that on its head? Is there another way to view that story? Okay, so let's all take 4 or 5 minutes for this. And then if you could in the chat, put the negative story that you've been telling yourself, and then write the new story that you're telling yourself. Okay. And then Monica could read some of those. I think it will be helpful for all of us to hear, how you're doing it and the stories that you're flipping on its head.
And while people are doing that, we still have 20 minutes, so we've got some time here to make sure we're addressing questions. But I do want to also read you some of the lovely comments about what people are saying. Ingrid is one of the strongest women I know. She's one of my greatest inspirations in life. I'm honored to call her my friend. That's from Cassie. From Alyssa, hi everyone from Paris, France. Ingrid is an amazing person. I'm so excited to hear her speak. Lori wrote, there's not an emoji to show that I'm in tears. Lisa wrote, Ingrid,
Me in tears.
Aw, Ingrid, you move me deeply. Thank you for sharing yourself with lots of little hearts. Um, let us be your mirror. You're an amazing, strong, beautiful woman. You're a walking hope and inspiration. I'm going to keep going. The only way we fail is if we quit. The only way we fail is if we give up. Thank you for that statement, Ingrid. Joe Dispenza is the author, right? That you talked about the meditation. The
You're the placebo making your mind matter. He's amazing. He's got a book on it, and then also a meditation on it.
Great. Marianne wrote, hearing of your loss, my initial overwhelming feeling like this is heartbreaking, but the more you speak, my reaction now is one of peace, hope, and inspiration, because you have made sure that if there are heartbreaks, your heart is breaking open to what can be and what the next chapter will be. Thank you for this powerful lesson. Thank you so much. Appreciate your vulnerability. So lots of great comments, and I wanted to make sure you're feeling the love from the audience. It's
Oh
getting
my
so
gosh,
much.
thank you. All of that. Thank you.
We have almost 70 people on the phone with us this morning from all over the world, and it's wonderful.
Cheers, guys. Thank you for being here.
And so if you have questions, go ahead and also put them in the chat. But as Ingrid mentioned, if you want to share a negativity and a reframe, now is a great time.
Yes, please. I would love to hear from all of you.
What also I'll share one with you, Ingrid, is I'm approaching empty nest. My youngest is graduating this week, tomorrow actually. Wow. And I've been walking around in my pity party going, oh, all my children are leaving me. And my husband finally stopped me and he's like, well, what would you want them to do? Like, would you want them to stay?
Right,
He's like,
right,
they're not,
right.
they're not leaving you. They're just moving on to next. Like, let's be proud that they're moving on. I'm like, oh, that's such a good reframe, like from being left to, hey, great, they're moving on to their next step of adulting, and I help them get there, right? So it's simple, but it made such a difference.
Yeah, it absolutely makes it's so amazing that really, and that's what I'm going to talk about in a minute, but really, whatever our mindset is, that's what we draw to us. I mean, it really is. It just refocuses everything. It's incredible.
Another comment here. Thank you, Ingrid. I appreciate your wonderfully honest and moving thoughts and ideas. And even if you don't want to share your exact reframe, if you have a question, feel free to put it in, or if you um, have an awareness as you're doing this exercise, feel free to share it. And just so you know, the chat is not recorded. Monica Smith, a reframe of I'm not good enough can be I'm going to do or try to do my best. Beautiful, Monica. Thank you for sharing.
One of the people that I coach is actually a former Seahawks coach. And he has this saying that I love. He says, never question your abilities, always critique your efforts. And just a reminder that we can always just work on our effort, but we've all got the ability. It's just what we're going to do with it, you know, and some it's different varies, but it just.
Amy wrote, Ingrid, I took your 4-week class last spring in the midst of the pandemic. It was so very healing for me to write a painful story from my coming of age years that I'd never told. Thank you. You're transformative. Cindy wrote, thank you, my gorgeous friend, for being so vulnerable. I have such a hard time wrapping my head around how you've felt as you've moved through this process. Hearing your heartbreak makes my heart break. But what I want you to take away from it is that my perspective has always been how incredible you are. You're an epic example of what winning looks like. You never quit. Your girls have the most perfect example for how to do life. I love you. I'm so excited for you. And P.S. Your hair looks amazing. Um, and Catherine asked if the course that Amy mentioned will be scheduled again, and I think we'll make sure we put on the website where people can find you and your resources, because you do have workshop and personal coaching and other speaking services available on your website.
Yeah, and I do want to say I do have, and I think there's still a couple slots left, that 4-week writing your story, writing to heal workshop through Hugo House. And there is, Monica, I just had my website switched over to a new hosting thing, and it sounds like my personal coaching thing broke, but hopefully under the workshops on that, you can see the link to Hugo House for that.
You do. And Hugo House is a great organization. Lori, thank you for that great phrase for me. Lori said, I said when my kids left and people asked if I was sad that our kids were moving out, I would say the only thing that would be worse is them not moving out. And that is so true. I love that.
That's awesome. Yeah. Why don't I, while these are coming in, and then it'll save a little bit of time at the end for more, I just want to kind of share the 4-step process that I
would
use
be great
every day, because it really is, like I said, for me, I almost feel like I have to do this every day. I think of it like weeding and seeding. I've got to weed out those negative stories before, or try to keep them out before they even come in. And then I have to keep seeding those positive ones. So first thing I do every morning, the minute I'm conscious, really before I even open my eyes, I start flooding my brain with every positive story I can think about. I tell myself, I am infinite. I am powerful. I envision sometimes myself standing like a giant over the city of Seattle. I'm strong. I sometimes I repeat the phrase that my friend Libby and I have said for years. I'm the power I am the light. And I just flood my brain with that. I am healthy. I am strong. I am infinite. So I'm so charged up by those that there is no room for those negative stories to seep in. And like I said, I do that before I even open up my eyes. Now, the next thing I do if I am really needing a little pickup is that I do a happy dance in my living room. And I got this off of this amazing book called E Squared. So it wasn't mine, but I crank up my volume to I Feel Good by James Brown, and I do a happy dance in my living room. And it's amazing. It's 2 or 3 minutes, but when I'm jumping around and getting those endorphins going to this feel good song, it just really changes things, changes the chemistry. So it's impossible to kind of stay flat. The third thing that I do, and this is amazing, it's this deep breathing exercise. It's called the Wim Hof breathing method, and you can find it on the internet. My friend Mal taught it to me, but literally you lay down flat on your back and do deep breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth, fairly rapid for 30 counts. Then you hold your breath for as long as you can. And then you exhale, take another deep breath, and then repeat that 3 counts. And it's amazing. Like I'd always read a lot about breathing. It's like, yeah, whatever. But what this does, it oxygenates your body. And I can, which is really interesting because my whole eye disease is about lack of blood flow and circulation. And I think that's probably a root of a lot of disease. But so it's interesting because when you're breathing it in, like in that rapid in out, I can actually feel kind of this cool breeze kind of going through my body. I can feel it circulating. I can feel it oxygenating my body. And it's really calming. And then holding that breath for as long too. And while I'm doing it, I hold an intention. And it just brings me so much peace and calm. And it really is good for your body. So even though like it takes all of 5 minutes, and I'm telling you, it's amazing, do it. But the biggest thing that I do now, and if you do nothing else, do this one. I practice gratitude. And I never really, I'd hear people talking about it. It's like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's amazing the power it has, amazing the difference it makes in my life. I think of life like a coin. And on one side of that coin is all the loss, all the struggle, everything that's wrong in our life. But the other side is everything that's right in our life. It's all the blessings, all the gifts, everything that we've been given. And you could say that both sides of those have some truth to it, right? You can find evidence for both sides. But the thing about it is, and what I've learned, so powerfully what I've learned, is that what we focus on, we energize. And what we energize, we expand and draw to us. And that's why when I was curled in that ball on my living room floor, lobbing all those negative stories to myself, I was just spiraling further and further down into that deep, dark pit because I was just drawing that. And that's why, same thing, when I was focused on that, I could find the evidence to support it. But when I started looking at what's right in my life, all the blessings and all the gifts and everything that I've got, starting with, look at this amazing community here, like the amazing love and support and community that I have, and then going outward, it's just incredible. So now what I do is every time I find myself, and I think you're talking about this a little bit, Monica, but whenever I find myself looking at the lost side of that coin, I'm just now, it's just being aware of it as much as anything. I'm so aware of it that when I start going that I envision, in my head, it's like tails and heads. So tails being the lost heads. So I immediately kind of focus on the head side of a quarter. That's what I envision in my mind. And then I focus on all that's right. The other thing that I do to really ingrain this, every morning when I'm walking with my husband to his office, where I squat in his office every day, I say out loud 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I make sure that every day, like I'm concentrating on something different because there's so much. And then I'll ask my husband, it's like, what are you grateful for? 3 things. And like I said, if nothing else, although I recommend all 4 of these things, um, but practicing gratitude and focusing on that gratitude, it's amazing. It's like the miracle drug. It really is the thing that enables you to create that life that you want for yourself, regardless of anything else. So
That's
anyway,
so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And I really appreciate how you have shared 4 things that feel simple, but probably are not easy to practice daily. And I think that consistency is so important. I also love that you do a happy dance. I was in sales for a long time, and whenever I had a big presentation, I found that if I danced and sung out loud first, the presentation went better because the energy flows better. So I agree that that movement and that creating joy in your body to create flow is a very powerful tool to use on many fronts.
right. I want
Um,
to hear from, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's some comments in the chat, but why don't you go ahead, and we have a few minutes left. Ask any other questions that you have for the audience, Ingrid.
Yeah, I just wondered if any of you have tricks that you want to share. I mean, I know I don't have a monopoly. These 4 steps really make a difference for me, but anyone else have any other thoughts or ideas for what really works for you in terms of flipping any negative story on its head and really staying in that kind of positive, kick-ass empowerment mindset?
I love that kick-ass empowerment mindset. That's awesome. Please share. It's Elizabeth says, mine would be going from I am broken, I can't do anything right. Um, my past is forever going to bring me darkness and pain, to I have many wounds. My past was difficult and changed me forever. Yet I have the power to transform what was darkness into a light that can shine from the broken places and maybe be a beacon for hope for someone else. I love that. I'm
That's
not broken,
really,
I'm
yeah,
human and unique.
that is beautiful.
And Elisa wrote a reframe about having a hard time with her husband going back to work and being out of the home and away, and reframing that to saying, I will use the alone time to focus on some personal goals and friendships and do more movie nights with my son. Thank you for sharing all of your insights and positivity. That's great. And then in terms of ideas, Deborah wrote maybe exercise, getting out in nature. Allison wrote, I think you're right on about the embodiment, laying on the ground, sitting with trees in nature, putting a stone on my navel. Oh, that sounds lovely.
Beautiful, Allison.
Monica Smith wrote, pausing and breathing before I go down a rat hole of self-pity or saying something I might not mean. It's lovely self-awareness. Asking for what I need, taking a deep breath, someone shared.
Thank you. These are fantastic.
Um, Another reframe, when I had gotten in over my head, I always used to say slammed, buried, drawing. Now I say I'm gig rich. Also, I've stopped apologizing. Instead of sorry for the slow reply, say thank you for your patience. Oh, I love that.
Nice. I'm going to use that. That's great.
I know I stopped saying I'm busy because that's such a negative word. And instead I say, oh, I'm in such demand. Oh, I'm in such demand.
Yes,
Sassy, right?
exactly.
Any last sassy sayings that people want to add? Ingrid is awesome. We'll make sure we're sharing the chat with Ingrid. I couldn't read all of them. There are so many great comments coming in. So for those of you who I couldn't read, we'll make sure we share this with Ingrid. But Ingrid, we have just a few minutes, and before I turn it over to Monica Smith, do you have any last comments that you want to share? You've given us so much today, but want to make
Yeah.
sure we give you an opportunity to close this beautiful segment.
Yeah, I'll just leave you with one more visual that Banaz, that incredible intuitive healer that I worked with, shared with me. She said, because this is what she said. She said, okay, so some days, I try to refocus from that loss to kind of, the passion and joy. And she says, some days, like, I just am caught in kind of that loss a little bit, that grief. And she said, if you're there, and I tell you, like, some days I still have those days. Some days I still cry and feel sorry for myself for a minute, but and she says, if you're there, give yourself permission to feel it and love yourself. She said, don't beat yourself up for feeling bad. That doesn't have any purpose. She said, just allow yourself to feel it, shower yourself with love so that it can pass through. But she said, but I want you to remember this. If you allow yourself to get onto that train, that train of those negative stories, that train that is kind of, and I think one of you just alluded to this. She said, remember that you do not have to ride that train all the way to the dark tunnel. She said, you can choose to get off that train anytime you want. And I was like, wow, that's powerful. I said, well, how do you do that? How do you get off that train? And she said, it's just being conscious of it. It's just being aware of it. And you'll find, and that it's the same thing that I was just talking about with that coin and being aware when I'm focusing on that loss side. It's that same visual, but I love that visual of a train, because just being conscious and just being aware of it is enough to say, okay, I'm going to feel this, but now I'm getting off that train. I don't need to, I know what that dark tunnel is like. I don't need to go into that dark tunnel. I think I'm going to hop off here and go smell some of these flowers and wander in the field instead. So just to leave you with that visual and to say, thank you for taking your time out of the day to be here with me. Cause I just am so passionate about this. And if anything I can do, to use my journey to help any of you, then it's completely made my entire year. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Ingrid. Thank you for being here and sharing so beautifully your story and your inspiration. There was a lot, and a lot of people are asking about the recording, and it will be available on revel11.com. Monica, do you want to go ahead and share what's happening next on Rev 11? Thank you, everyone. I'm turning it over to Monica Smith.
I would love to. Ingrid and Monica, thank you so much. I particularly like the dance break tip. It's such a powerful tool to change your energy.
Yeah.
And I love, excuse me, the comment about it's a conscious choice. It's at least a conscious choice to decide to use one of those 4 tips, at least to try to reframe what's going on in your head. So thank you so much. That was so wonderful. And I feel so supported right now. And thank you all for joining us. I do want to mention a few events that we have coming up.